The hum of the office printer mixed with the faint hiss of the coffee machine. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, casting a pale glow over the break room where Aurora Lane sat perched on the edge of the counter, nursing her third cup of lukewarm coffee. Lauren Blake, her best friend and partner in survival in this corporate jungle, was scrolling through her phone, pretending to check emails but actually reading memes. It was late afternoon, the hour when energy dipped, when ambition gave way to sarcasm and caffeine. Aurora sighed, her voice carrying the kind of exhaustion that only spreadsheets and impossible deadlines could cause. "If I stare at another financial report, I swear my brain will melt." Lauren chuckled. "You're dramatic. Maybe you just need some inspiration. Maybe from a certain CEO who just walked by your desk an hour ago." Aurora groaned. "Don't start." But Lauren only grinned wider, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, come on, Aura. Admit it. Every time he passes by, your typing speed drops by half. It's practically a company record." Aurora bit her lip, trying to hide the smile tugging at her mouth. She hated that Lauren was right. Damian West, the impossibly composed, maddeningly attractive CEO of Westbridge Enterprises, had a gravitational pull that messed with her pulse. He wasn't just handsome, he was precision incarnate. Dark suits that fit like they were sewn onto his body, a jawline sharp enough to cut through glass, and those eyes, amber, unreadable, and cold, as if he'd built walls that no one could climb. Aurora had seen him in meetings, in hallways, in elevators, always calm, always distant, never a hair out of place, never a smile that reached his eyes. He was everything she couldn't have and everything she secretly wanted. To protect herself from the ache of that impossible fantasy, she'd built a story, a ridiculous lie she used to keep her feelings safely contained. "He's too perfect," Aurora said, her tone teasing, trying to sound casual as she stirred her coffee. "He must be gay." Lauren burst out laughing. "Oh my God, Aura." "What?" Aurora shrugged, grinning. "It makes sense. No one that gorgeous, that put together can be straight. It's nature's balance. Someone that flawless has to be unattainable." "Or maybe," Lauren teased, "he's just not interested in you." Aurora gasped dramatically. Ouch. Rude but possibly accurate. Their laughter echoed across the room, bright and careless. It was the kind of laughter that loosened the knots of a long day, until it suddenly stopped. Lauren's expression shifted. The color drained from her face. Her eyes darted past Aurora's shoulder. Aurora frowned. "What?" Lauren didn't answer, just mouthed something silently. Two words that made Aurora's stomach twist. "He's behind you." The air thickened. Aurora's heart started to pound. She turned slowly, and there he was, Damian West, standing barely 6 feet away, a coffee cup in hand, his expression unreadable. Time seemed to slow. His eyes met hers, amber and steady, and in that look, she saw it all. Amusement, surprise, something darker flickering beneath. Her throat went dry. "Mr. West?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. He didn't reply. He just placed his coffee cup on the counter beside her with measured calm, the sound of porcelain against metal loud in the silence. Every employee in the room froze. Lauren's jaw dropped. Someone by the vending machine pretended to check their phone but didn't blink. Damian took one slow step forward, then another. His gaze never left Aurora's face. She felt the blood rush to her cheeks, her body caught between humiliation and a strange, dangerous thrill. "You think I'm gay?" His voice was low, smooth, and terrifyingly quiet. Aurora opened her mouth, but nothing. G came out. He moved closer until she could feel the warmth radiating off him, smell the faint trace of cedar and smoke from his cologne. Her breath caught. He lifted a hand, fingers brushing her jaw. The room spun. Then, without warning, he kissed her. It wasn't soft. It wasn't tentative. It was deliberate, deep, and commanding, the kind of kiss that silenced every thought, every whisper, every doubt. Her hands trembled, her knees threatened to give way, her pulse roared in her ears, and just as suddenly as it began, it ended. He pulled back, eyes dark, voice barely above a whisper. "Next time you want to know something about me, ask me directly." Then he turned and walked out, leaving a stunned silence behind him. Aurora stood frozen, her lips tingling, her heart a storm of disbelief and desire. Lauren's voice broke the silence, shaky and wide-eyed. "Aura, did that just happen?" Aurora couldn't answer, because the taste of his kiss still lingered, and deep down she knew that moment had just changed everything. Aurora barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the way he'd looked at her after the kiss, calm, cold, and unreadable. But there had been something else hidden under that composure, something that burned. She kept telling herself it was a dream, that maybe she had imagined it, but her lips still tingled, and every nerve in her body remembered the heat of his hands. By morning her stomach was a knot of dread and disbelief. When her alarm rang, she stared at the ceiling, wondering if she should even go to work. Maybe she could quit, find a new job, start over somewhere. No one knew her name, or the story of how she had kissed her boss in the break room, except she hadn't kissed him. He had kissed her, and that thought terrified her even more. The office felt different that day. The usual chatter was replaced by whispers. Her co-workers looked at her, then quickly looked away. Lauren tried to act normal, but her nervous smile gave everything away. Everyone knew something had happened. Everyone wanted to know what it meant. Aurora kept her head down, typing aimlessly, pretending to focus until an email notification flashed on her screen. Subject line: "My office. 9 a.m. Her heart stopped. She read it again. The name beneath it made her stomach twist. Damian West. The time crawled until 9. Every second heavier than the last, she walked to his office, her heels clicking too loudly against the marble floor. The receptionist gave her a sympathetic glance before opening the door. Damian stood by the window, his back to her, his suit perfectly pressed as always. Sunlight cut across his shoulders, outlining him like a sculpture of power and control. He didn't turn when she entered. The silence was thick. "You wanted to see me?" she said, her voice barely steady. "Close the door." His tone was quiet, but it carried weight. She obeyed the sound of the door closing behind her. Felt final. He finally turned around, his expression unreadable except for his eyes. They were sharper than she'd ever seen, almost glowing in the light. He studied her for a long moment, not speaking, not moving. Then he said, "I assume you didn't sleep." Her pulse jumped. "Why would you assume that?" "Because I didn't," he replied calmly, and the air left her lungs. She didn't know what to say. The apology she'd prepared dissolved somewhere between her heart and her throat. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It was stupid. I didn't mean anything by it. It was a joke, a nervous one." He walked closer, every step deliberate, until he stopped just inches from her. "You said I was too perfect," he said, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down her spine. "Then you decided I must be gay." She couldn't meet his eyes. "It was a joke," she repeated, weaker this time. He leaned in close enough that she could feel his breath against her ear. "You make a lot of jokes, don't you, Miss Lane?" His words were soft but dangerous. "I guess it's how you protect yourself." Her breath caught. How would he know that he straightened his tie as if shaking off whatever emotion had crept in? "I don't tolerate gossip in my company, but I'm not firing you yet because I'm still trying to decide what that moment was." He paused, his gaze dropping to her lips, and Aurora felt her pulse stumble. Was it an accident? Or was it something else? Something we both felt? The question hung between them, heavy and electric. She couldn't answer. She didn't even understand it herself. All she knew was that when he'd kissed her, something inside her had awakened, something wild and terrifying and alive. He stepped back, breaking the tension as suddenly as he'd created it. "There's an investor dinner tonight. I expect you there, as my assistant, strictly professional." "Of course," he said the last words with a flicker of irony in his tone. Aurora blinked. What investor dinner it was. The first she'd heard of it. 7 sharp, he added, ignoring her confusion, and dress appropriately. Before she could protest, he returned his attention to the city below as if the conversation were already over. Her heart pounded as she turned to leave. His voice stopped her halfway to the door. "Aurora." She froze, her hand on the handle. "When I kissed you yesterday," he said quietly, "I didn't plan it, but I don't regret it." She turned to face him, but his expression had gone cold again. The conversation dismissed. She left his office feeling dizzy, her thoughts a storm of panic, and something she couldn't name. That night, as the city lights flickered outside her window, Aurora realized she was in more danger than she had imagined. Not the kind that destroyed careers, but the kind that destroyed hearts, because Damian West wasn't just her boss anymore. He was a secret. She couldn't stop wanting the night of the investor dinner. Aurora stood in front of her mirror, her reflection trembling as much as her hands. She had changed outfits 3 times before settling on a black dress that looked far too daring for her usual comfort. Her heartbeat felt uneven every time she thought of seeing him. Again, she had promised herself she would stay calm, she would be professional, she would not let his voice, his eyes, or his memory undo her. But deep down, she knew that was a promise she could not keep. The restaurant was one of those exclusive places where time itself seemed to move slower. Dim lights, warm wood, soft jazz, the air thick with perfume and ambition. Damian was already there when she arrived, sitting with 3 men in expensive suits. He looked breathtaking, even from a distance. Confident, composed, impossibly calm. The sight of him made her breath catch and her stomach twist. He saw her before she could pretend she hadn't noticed him. His gaze found her across the room and didn't let go. There was no warmth in it, but no indifference either. It was fire, carefully contained. She walked toward the table, every step deliberate, every nerve alive. He stood to greet her, his hand brushing lightly against her back as he whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "You look beautiful." Aurora froze. It wasn't the compliment that shook her. It was the way he said it, like a confession disguised as courtesy. The dinner passed in a blur of small talk, numbers, laughter, forced smiles. Aurora tried to focus on the conversation, but her thoughts kept drifting to the man sitting beside her, the subtle way his fingers tapped against the table when he was deep in thought. The scent of his cologne, the quiet authority in his tone when he spoke to the investors. At one point, she caught him watching her reflection in the wine glass, and her pulse tripped. When the dinner ended, he thanked the guests with effortless charm and sent his driver to take them home as the last car disappeared into the night. He turned to her. "Stay a moment," he said, his voice lower now, heavier than before. She followed him through the quiet back exit into a narrow alley lined with lights and the faint sound of the city. The air was cool, but her skin felt hot. "That was a mistake," Aurora said quickly, trying to regain control. "Last night, the kiss, the tension, it can't happen again." He looked at her, not with anger, but with something else, something she couldn't name. He took a slow step forward, then another until she was backed against the brick wall of the alley. His hand braced beside her head, trapping her without touching her. His eyes burned into hers. "You keep calling it a mistake," he said softly, almost whispering, "but you're shaking right now, so tell me if it was a mistake. Why are you trembling?" She opened her mouth to answer, but words failed her. The distance between them vanished. His breath mingled with hers, his tone dropped lower. "I don't want to hurt you, Aurora, but you're driving me insane every time you look at me like that. Every time you pretend you don't feel this." She swallowed hard, trying to fight the pull of his voice, of his presence. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied. He smiled faintly, then leaned closer, close enough for his lips to brush the side of her jaw without kissing her. The touch was light, barely there, but it burned through her skin. "If I kiss you again," he murmured, "you'll have to admit the truth that you want me as much as I want you." Her pulse thundered. She wanted to deny it, to walk away, but when his fingers brushed her wrist lightly, she felt electricity surge through her chest. Her resolve cracked. She hated how easily he could make her weak, but before either of them could move further, the sound of footsteps echoed from the corner. They both froze. Damian pulled back instantly, his face shifting back into the unreadable mask of the CEO. An employee emerged from the shadows, startled to see them. "Mr. West, the car is ready, sir." "Thank you," Damian said calmly, his tone perfectly controlled, as if nothing had happened. He turned to Aurora and added quietly, "Tomorrow morning, my office 9 sharp." Then he walked away, leaving her in the dim alley, breathless, shaking, confused, her heart pounding against her ribs. Aurora leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. She could still feel him, still hear him, still smell the faint trace of his cologne on her skin. She had thought the kiss in the break room was the peak of her disaster, but now she knew it wasn't even close. Something deeper was beginning, something dangerous, something she couldn't stop, and maybe didn't want to stop at all. The next morning, the office felt colder than usual. Aurora walked through the glass doors, and every whisper seemed to follow her like invisible shadows. People looked up when she passed and then pretended they hadn't. Her heart raced with every step, her heels clicking like a countdown to something she wasn't ready for. She hadn't seen Damien since that night in the alley, but she had thought about him every hour, every breath, every dream. She told herself she would face him calmly, that she would draw a line this time, but deep down, she already knew there was no line left to draw. His assistant told her he was waiting inside. She knocked softly once, twice, then entered the room, was bright sunlight spilling across the marble floor. Damien stood by the window, hands in his pockets, the city stretching out behind him. He didn't turn immediately when she entered. He spoke without looking at her. Close the door. Aurora did as he said. The silence that followed was unbearable. "You avoided me all weekend," he said quietly. "I thought it was best," she replied, trying to sound steady. "You think distance fixes desire?" he asked, turning now, his eyes finding hers. The intensity in them made her heart falter. "I think it fixes mistakes," she said quickly. He took a step closer and another until she could see the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes, and something softer buried beneath the control. "Do you believe I regret it?" he asked. She blinked, taken aback. "You should," she whispered. "Maybe I should," he said, "but I don't." His honesty hit her harder than anger would have. He walked around the desk, stopping right in front of her, his voice low and calm. "I've been trying to ignore this since the moment you opened your mouth in that break room, but every time I see you, it gets worse. Every time I try to work, I hear your voice, your laugh. You've invaded everything." Aurora's throat tightened. "Damien, this isn't right. I work for you. You lead this company. If anyone finds out, then let them," he interrupted sharply. "I built this place from nothing. I can face them, but what I can't face is pretending I don't want you." She froze. He rarely raised his voice, but now his words cut through the room like lightning. He took a slow breath, forcing his control back, the storm behind his eyes dimming. "Sit down, Aurora," he said. She hesitated, but obeyed. He sat across from her, his gaze softer. "Now I need you to understand something," he continued. "Years ago, I let emotion destroy my judgment. I fell in love with someone I shouldn't have trusted. They used me, used this company when it collapsed. I promised myself never again, never to mix business with anything personal, never to feel this. But here you are, breaking every rule I ever made." The confession shocked her. Damien never talked about his past. She searched his face for a hint of the man behind the legend. For the first time, she saw cracks in his perfect armor. He looked human, vulnerable, almost haunted. "You don't know what you're doing," she whispered. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I know what I want." He stood and leaned over the desk, his hand braced on the surface, his eyes locked on hers. "Tell me to stop, and I will." Aurora couldn't breathe. The air between them shimmered with tension. Her mind screamed to walk away, but her body refused. She stood too, her pulse a drum against her. "Ribs, Damien, this will ruin everything." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it will save something instead." Then he reached out slowly, almost hesitantly. His hand brushed her cheek, light as air. She closed her eyes, trembling, torn between fear and longing. Before either of them could say another word, the door opened without warning. Lauren stepped in mid-sentence about a report, then froze, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. Damien straightened instantly, his face turning to stone. Lauren stammered, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were in a meeting." She backed out, quickly shutting the door. Aurora's stomach dropped. She turned back to Damien, panic rising. "They'll talk," she whispered. He didn't move. "Let them," he said, his voice flat, but there was something dark in his expression, as if he knew the storm that was about to come. That afternoon, whispers spread like wildfire around the building. People talked in corners, phones buzzed. The rumor of the CEO and his assistant had escaped its walls. Aurora tried to focus on her work, but her hands shook. She caught glimpses of Damien through the glass walls, always calm, always unreadable, yet every time their eyes met, something passed between them, something that burned through the noise around them. As the day ended, Aurora packed her bag, but before she could leave, a message appeared on her phone from an unknown number. "Meet me on the rooftop." 10 minutes. She knew who it was, and even though every instinct told her not to go, she was already on her way. The rooftop wind was sharp, the city lights below endless. Damien stood near the edge, coat unbuttoned, hair slightly tousled from the wind. He looked different, less controlled, more real. "You shouldn't have come," he said without turning. "You shouldn't have kissed me," she replied. He turned, then his eyes full of conflict. Maybe both were mistakes, or maybe both were the beginning of something we can't undo. The sound of sirens echoed far below, and for a moment they just stood there, between danger and desire, between reason and something that felt like destiny. The night stretched around them, heavy with unspoken promises, and Aurora realized there was no going back. Whatever this was, it had already begun. The wind whipped across the rooftop that night, carrying away the last fragments of Aurora's logic. She stood facing Damien under the glow of the city lights, her hair tangled by the cold air, her heart thundering against her ribs. He looked at her like he was trying to memorize her face, as if unsure if he'd see her again. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but each word felt deliberate. "I tried to stay away," he said, "but I can't, and neither can you. Can you?" Aurora shook her head, unable to lie, unable to breathe. "You don't understand," she whispered. "This isn't something we can control." Damien stepped closer, until only inches separated them. "Maybe it isn't about control anymore. Maybe it's about truth. And you're the first truth I've seen in years." She wanted to fight it, but something inside her broke open. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the way his eyes softened when they met hers, the way her name sounded different when he said it, like a confession instead of a title. She took a step back, desperate to pull herself together, but he reached out, catching her hand. His grip was firm, not forceful, but certain. The city stretched endlessly behind him, and for a moment, it felt like they were standing on the edge of something vast and dangerous. "Damien, you have to let me go," she said, her voice trembling. "If this continues, it'll destroy us both." He stared at her, the corner of his mouth tightening. "Maybe it already has," he said softly. But before either of them could speak again, the rooftop door opened sharply. A man in a dark coat stepped out. It was Ethan Voss, Damien's former partner, now a rival whose name had been whispered through boardrooms and headlines for months. "Well, this is unexpected," Ethan said, his voice smooth and sharp as glass. "The great Damien West alone on the roof with his assistant. What will the investors think?" Damien's eyes turned to steel. "What are you doing here?" Ethan smiled, something cold and knowing. "I came to congratulate you, though from the looks of it, you're already celebrating." Aurora felt the air shift. Something about Ethan's tone sent a chill down her spine. Damien moved slightly in front of her, his stance protective. She realized then that whatever history existed between the two men was darker than gossip. Ethan took a step closer, his eyes sliding from Damien to Aurora. "So this is the reason you've been distracted lately," he said. "Your little secret?" Aurora's breath caught. Damien's voice dropped low enough to cut through the tension. "You don't belong here. Get out." Ethan laughed low and dangerous. "Oh, I belong everywhere. You don't remember who helped you build this empire, who gave you your first break?" The silence between them thickened with old anger. Aurora could feel it radiating from both men. Something had happened long ago, something that still burned. Ethan's smirk deepened. "Enjoy your rooftop romance while it lasts, Damien," he said, "because by tomorrow the world will be talking about it." He turned and left, the sound of the door slamming, echoing like a threat. Damien ran a hand through his hair, his jaw clenched. "Damn it," he muttered. Aurora stepped closer. What did he mean by that? Damien looked at her, his eyes dark with realization. Ethan doesn't just talk, he exposes, he destroys, and now he's seen you with me. Her heart dropped. "Are you saying he'll tell people, he'll leak it?" Damien nodded, his tone grim. "That's exactly what he'll do. The rumors, the photos, the headlines. It's how he works. Ruin the person first, then the business." She stared at him, the full weight of the danger sinking in. "What are we supposed to do?" His gaze softened for the first time in minutes. He reached for her hand, this time with gentleness. We don't run, we stay ahead of him. That night Aurora couldn't sleep. She lay awake replaying every word, every look, every warning. Her phone buzzed, just past midnight. A message from an unknown number. She opened it, and her blood turned cold. It was a photo of her and Damien on the rooftop, his hand holding hers, his face inches from hers. Below the image were only 4 words. Guess who's watching now? Her chest tightened. She jumped out of bed, dialing Damien's number. He answered instantly, already awake. "He's moving faster than I thought," he said. "Meet me at the office now." Aurora hesitated. "It's midnight." He cut her off. "I know. Just come." When she arrived, the building was empty except for the glow of his office lights. Damien stood by the window again, but this time he wasn't calm. His tie was loosened. His sleeves rolled up his phone, buzzing non-stop. He turned toward her, his eyes sharp. "We have one chance," he said, "to stop this before it spreads." "How?" she asked. He picked up a folder from his desk and handed it to her. Inside were documents, phone logs, and old emails. Ethan's blackmail evidence from years ago. Damien's voice was low. "This is what he's been hiding, and this is how we end him." As she looked up from the papers, their eyes met, the air between them charged with fear and something stronger. Whatever happened next, she knew their lives would never be the same, because they weren't just fighting a scandal anymore, they were fighting for each other. The city was still dark when Aurora and Damien left the building that night, the streets nearly empty, the wind sharp against their faces. They had a folder filled with evidence that could destroy Ethan Voss, but it was only a matter of time before he struck first. Damien's jaw was tight, his eyes fixed straight ahead, every muscle in his body braced for what was coming. Aurora followed beside him, her heart pounding. She had never seen him like this, stripped of his calm, composed armor. He looked almost human, and that scared her even more. They stopped outside his car, the street lights flickering above them. Damien runned to her, his voice low. "This isn't just about us anymore. Ethan has been planning this for years. He wants everything I've built gone, and now he'll use you to do it." Aurora swallowed hard. "I can handle people talking about me," she said. "No, you can't," he replied, his tone sharp but not cruel. "You don't know what he's capable of. He ruins people, not just their careers but their lives, their names." They drove in silence through the sleeping city, the sound of the engine filling the space between them. When they reached Damien's penthouse, she hesitated at the door. "Are we safe here?" she asked. "For tonight?" "Yes," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. Inside, the lights were dim, the skyline stretching endlessly through the glass windows. It was beautiful and lonely all at once. Damien poured himself a drink, his movements deliberate, controlled, but Aurora could sense the storm behind his eyes. She stepped closer. "You said Ethan used to be your friend. What happened?" He paused for a long moment, staring at the amber liquid in his glass. "He and I built this company together," he finally said. "I trusted him more than anyone until he betrayed me. He leaked confidential information to our competitors, nearly destroyed the business, and when I confronted him, he tried to pin it all on my brother." Her heart ached at the mention of his brother. "What happened to him?" she asked quietly. Damien's voice broke slightly. "He took the fall for something he didn't do. The media ripped him apart. He couldn't handle the shame. One night he just didn't come home." Aurora felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "That's why you hate rumors and lies, isn't it?" He nodded slowly. "Because I've seen how words can kill." For a moment neither of them spoke, the silence thick with grief and guilt. Damien finally looked at her, his eyes softer now. "When you said that joke about me being gay, it reminded me of what people said about him at Fee. Like history repeating itself." Aurora felt tears sting her eyes. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." He shook his head. "You couldn't have known, but Ethan used that moment to strike. He's going to twist it, make it bigger than it is." Suddenly Damien's phone buzzed. He picked it up and froze. A photo filled the screen. It was them, together again this time, inside his office, his hand brushing her cheek. Another caption beneath it, "Tomorrow morning." Headlines: "Westbridge, CEO's forbidden affair." Aurora gasped. "How did he get that?" Damien's voice was hard. "There are cameras hidden somewhere. Probably inside the office. He's been planning this from the start. He threw the phone onto the couch, his control cracking. For the first time, she moved closer, placing a hand on his arm. "We'll fight this together," she said. "You're not alone anymore." He looked at her, his anger faltering, replaced by something raw and unguarded. "Aurora, you don't understand what you're offering. If this goes public, you'll lose your job, your name, everything." She met his gaze steady. "Then, let it happen. I don't care about the company or the rumors. I care about you." The confession hung in the air, heavier than any truth either of them had spoken before. He stepped forward slowly until their faces were inches apart. His voice, barely a whisper. "Don't say things like that, unless you mean them." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I mean every word." He closed the distance between them, his lips finding hers, not with the reckless hunger of before, but with something deeper, something that felt like surrender. His hands cupped her face gently as if afraid she might disappear. Her arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer. The world outside disappeared in that moment. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Damien pressed his forehead against hers and whispered, "We'll end this together, I promise." But just as he spoke the words, his phone lit up again with a new message. A video this time. Damien played it, and both of their faces went pale. The footage showed Ethan sitting behind a desk, smiling at the cam. "Into it too," she hesitated, then said firmly, "I'm already in it. Whether I want to be or not." The door suddenly burst open. 2 men in suits from the board entered, followed by security. "Damien West," one of them said coldly. "The board has voted. You're relieved of your duties, effective immediately." Damien didn't flinch. "I expected this," he replied. He turned to Aurora. "Go home," he said softly. She shook her head, tears burning in her eyes. "Damien, please." He gave her a look that said everything. "Trust me, just go." Security escorted him out through the lobby. Reporters crowded the doors, flashes of cameras blinding the air, filled with shouted questions about the affair, about Aurora, about the company. Damien didn't answer any of them. He just kept walking until the glass doors closed behind him. The man who once ruled the city now looked like a ghost, swallowed by the noise. That night, Aurora sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through endless articles, each one more cruel than the last. Her phone buzzed again, an unknown number. She almost didn't answer until she saw the message. "If you want to know the truth about Damien West, meet me at Pier 40 midnight. No names, no calls." Her stomach twisted. She knew it was a trap, and yet something inside her told her to go. She wrapped herself in a coat and left the apartment. Rain started to fall, light at first, then heavy. The pier was nearly empty except for a few boats swaying in the dark. She saw a figure standing by the railing, tall, still waiting. "Ethan Voss. So you came," he said, his voice smug. "I should have guessed you'd want answers." She kept her distance. "What do you want?" Ethan shrugged. "Let's just say I'm curious how much you know about the man you're protecting." He pulled a file from his coat and tossed it onto a nearby bench. Inside were photographs and bank records, all linked to Damien West. "These show he wasn't always the saint he pretends to be." Ethan said, "Do help from me. Help." He never acknowledged. Aurora's hands shook as she flipped through the papers. None of it made sense. "I don't believe you," she said. Ethan smiled. "You will?" He leaned closer, his voice lowering. "You think this is about revenge? It's not. It's about truth. Your lover built his empire on lies, and I'm going to prove it." Before she could reply, the sound of footsteps echoed behind her. Damien appeared out of the shadows, rain soaking his coat, his eyes locked on Ethan. "Stay away from her," he said. Ethan smirked. Always the hero. "West." Damien stepped closer, his tone dangerous. "Leave her out of this." Ethan chuckled. "Or what? You'll hit me, ruin me again? The way you did before?" Damien's jaw tightened. Aurora looked between them, confused. "What's he talking about?" Ethan's smirk widened. "He never told you, did he? That I was the one who created Westbridge with him, that his success came from my designs and my money until he stole it all." His voice grew sharper. "While you were building his dream, I was watching mine burn." Damien's voice cut through the rain. "I didn't steal from you. You gambled the company's funds to cover your debts, and when it fell apart, my brother took the blame." Ethan's expression flickered with something darker, guilt or rage. Aurora couldn't tell. He stepped back slowly. "The next storm is already coming," he said. Enjoy what's left of your reputation." Then he disappeared into the rain. Damien turned to Aurora. She looked at him silently, the sound of waves crashing filling the silence. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Tell me the truth, Damien. Is it true, what he said?" He hesitated, the pause too long, too heavy. Finally, he whispered, "Yes, but it's not what you think." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to think anymore," she said, and before he could stop her, she turned and ran into the rain, leaving him standing there alone under the storm, knowing that for the first time he moaned, "I'd truly lose everything, including her." The rain didn't stop that night. It came down harder, drenching the city in gray. Aurora ran until her legs burned, until the sound of her name faded behind her. She stopped under a bridge, shaking her hair plastered to her face, her heart breaking with every thought that screamed in her mind. Everything had shattered: her job, her reputation, and now the man she thought she could trust. She sank onto the cold concrete, her hands gripping the edge of her coat as the truth twisted inside her. If Damien had lied once, how many other things had he hidden? By morning, her picture was everywhere. The news called her the woman who ruined a CEO, the homewrecker, the gold digger. No one knew the truth, but no one cared either. She turned off her phone, packed a small bag, and left the apartment. She couldn't stay in that city anymore, not while every whisper carried her name. She boarded a train heading north without knowing where she was going. Just away, 2 days passed before she stopped in a quiet coastal town far from New York. She rented a small room above a bookstore and tried to disappear. During the day, she helped the old owner shelve books at night. She sat by the window watching the sea, trying to convince herself she no longer cared. But every sound, every dream carried his voice. Back in the city, Damien's world was falling apart. Ethan's accusations had spread deeper than anyone expected. Investors pulled out contracts, vanished. The company he'd built was now a battlefield of lawyers and vultures. He spent nights at his penthouse, surrounded by silence, staring at the phone, waiting for a call that never came. He had lost her, and now he was losing everything else. 3 weeks later, a knock came on Aurora's door. It was Lauren, drenched from the rain, holding an envelope. "You need to see this," she said, breathless. "How did you find me?" Aurora asked. Lauren smiled faintly. "I followed the trail of scandal everyone's been trying to find you, Damien, especially." Aurora's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Lauren handed her the envelope. Inside were newspaper clippings, headlines about Ethan Voss arrested for embezzlement and fraud. Aurora's eyes widened. "I don't understand." Lauren took a deep breath. "Damien turned everything over to the police. The documents you found that night, he used them. He lost the company, but he cleared his brother's name and exposed Ethan." Aurora sank into a chair, her mind spinning. "He did all that?" Lauren nodded. "He said it was the only way to end it. But there's more." She pulled out a small flash drive. "He left this for you. Said, if you ever wanted to know the truth, watch it." After Lauren left, Aurora sat staring at the drive for a long time before finally plugging it into her laptop. The video flickered to life. Damien's face appeared on the screen, his eyes tired but steady. "If you're watching this, it means it's over," he began. "I didn't lie to you, Aurora. I just didn't tell you everything. Ethan was right about one thing. He helped me build Westbridge, but after my brother's death, he tried to use that to destroy me. When I met you, I wasn't supposed to feel anything. I told myself I couldn't, but you changed that. You made me remember what it means to be alive, and because of that, I lost everything again. But this time, I don't regret it." He paused, his voice softer now. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know the truth. I love you. That's the only thing that ever mattered." The screen went black. Aurora sat frozen, tears sliding down her face. She closed the laptop, pressing her hands over her mouth. The man she'd thought was a liar had sacrificed everything to protect her. She grabbed her coat and ran out into the rain again, this time not to escape, but to return. When she reached New York, the city looked different, harsher, colder. The Westbridge building was under new ownership, Damien's name gone from the door. She went to his penthouse, but it was empty. The doorman said he'd left 2 days earlier, heading to his family's old estate outside the city. Without thinking, Aurora called a cab. The drive took hours. By the time she arrived, the sky had turned dark. The mansion stood quiet, surrounded by trees, the windows glowing faintly. She stepped out, heart racing, and walked up the steps, knocking once, then again. The door opened slowly. Damien stood there, his eyes widening in disbelief. She was soaked from the rain, just like the night she'd left. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, as if afraid she wasn't real. She took a shaky breath. "I watched the video, Damien. I know everything now." His expression softened, but his voice was low. "You shouldn't have come. They'll still come after me." She stepped closer. "I don't care. Let them come. I'm not running anymore." For a moment, neither of them moved. The storm raged outside, lightning flashing across the windows. Then he reached out, pulling her against him, the warmth of his embrace washing away weeks of fear. He whispered against her hair, "I thought I'd lost you forever." She smiled through her tears. "You almost did." As thunder cracked above them, the truth settled between them. Nothing would ever be easy again. The world still wanted to tear them apart. But standing there in the storm, Aurora knew one thing was certain. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The storm outside grew wilder that night. But inside the old mansion, everything was still. Aurora sat by the fire wrapped in a blanket while Damien paced near the window, his face caught between relief and exhaustion. He had barely spoken since she arrived, but his silence said more than words ever could. Finally, he stopped and turned to her, his voice low. "I thought if I lost you I could survive it. But I was wrong when you left. It felt like every part of me went with you." She stood slowly walking toward him, her heart trembling. "I didn't leave because I stopped caring. I left because I didn't know what was true anymore." He stepped closer until the firelight flickered across his face, and she could see the pain he'd been carrying. "I should have told you everything from the beginning," he said. "Ethan wasn't just after me. He was after my brother's legacy, too." His voice broke slightly. "Everything I've done, every lie, every decision was to protect that." Aurora looked up at him, realizing how tired he looked, how human for the first time. He wasn't the unshakable CEO. He was just a man who'd lost too much. She reached for his hand and said softly, "Then stop running from it." Damien let it go, let him rest. Damien exhaled, his shoulders sagging. "I want to, but Ethan isn't finished, even behind bars. He still has people working for him. They've been threatening to release the last of his files." "What files?" she asked. "The ones that could destroy what's left of my name," he replied. "They claim I bribed officials years ago to cover up Ethan's crimes. If those get out, no one will believe the truth." Aurora's stomach twisted. "What do you mean by threatening him?" He met her gaze. "I mean, we don't have time to wait." Before she could respond, headlights flashed across the windows, tires crunching on gravel. Damien's expression changed from weary to alert. "Stay here," he said, already moving toward the door. Aurora followed anyway as the front door opened. A black car stopped outside. 3 men stepped out, all in dark coats, one of them holding a briefcase. Damien's tone turned cold. "What do you want?" The tallest man smiled. "Your signature, Mr. West. Ethan sends his regards." Damien stiffened, his jaw tight. "I don't make deals with criminals." The man's grin widened. "Then I suppose we'll make you." In one swift motion, 2 of the men lunged forward. Damien pushed Aurora back, yelling, "Run!" She stumbled but refused to leave. Grabbing a heavy vase from the side table, she swung it hard, hitting one of the men. He cursed and fell. Damien caught the second with a punch that sent him crashing into the wall. The 3rd man opened the briefcase. Ace pulling out a gun, Aurora froze as he pointed it toward Damien. Time seemed to stop. But before the shot could fire, police sirens wailed outside, red and blue lights flashing through the rain. The man cursed and bolted for the back door. The others followed. Damien pulled Aurora into his arms, holding her tight as officers stormed the driveway. She could feel his heartbeat pounding against her cheek. Minutes later, the chaos settled. 2 officers questioned them quickly before hauling the men away. Damien stood in the doorway, soaked from rain, his breath still heavy. "You shouldn't have stayed," he said. She looked at him with defiance and fear in her voice. "I wasn't going to watch them hurt you again." He stared at her for a long time, then laughed quietly. Not from amusement, but relief. "You're going to get me killed one day." She smiled softly. "Maybe, but not tonight." The next morning, the news spread that Ethan's men had been arrested for attempted extortion. The evidence inside the briefcase turned out to be fake. A desperate last move from a man who had already lost Damien's name began to clear the media, slowly shifting from scandal to redemption. But Aurora knew their story wasn't finished. Not yet. As dawn lit the windows, she found Damien standing outside near the cliff overlooking the sea. The wind tangled his hair, the world below them glimmering like new beginnings. He turned when she approached, saying quietly, "The board offered me back my position. I told them, no, I'm done chasing power. I'm done being that man." She smiled gently. "What will you do now?" He looked at her, the hint of a real smile touching his lips. "Build something that matters. This time, something honest." She stepped closer, tilting her head. "And what about us?" Damien took her hands, his touch warm against the cold morning air. "I don't want to hide anymore," he said. "No lies, no contracts, just truth, you and me. If you'll still have me." Aurora's heart swelled as she whispered, "Always." They stood there as the sun rose, the waves crashing below them. Their past still scarred their future, uncertain, but for the first time neither of them was running anymore. The world might still talk, the ghosts of their mistakes might still whisper, but love had survived everything, and as Damien kissed her forehead, he knew that even if the world tried to break them again, they would rise stronger together. Weeks passed since the night of the attack. The scandal had faded from headlines, but the scars it left behind still lingered. Aurora and Damien spent their days rebuilding piece by piece. They no longer lived in the shadows, no longer cared about the eyes watching from afar. The city had changed toward them. The same people who whispered once now watched with curiosity. The story of the fallen CEO and the woman who refused to leave his side had become something different, something people couldn't stop talking about. But peace never comes without one final storm. One evening, as rain returned to the city, Aurora sat in Damien's study. Flipping through old letters from his brother's things, she found a sealed envelope tucked between documents, her name written on it in neat handwriting. She frowned and handed it to Damien. He opened it slowly. Inside was a note written in his brother's handwriting. It read, "Ethan isn't finished. He made copies of everything. If you're reading this, he'll come for you again." Damien's breath caught his eyes narrowing. This means someone still has the files. Someone out there wants them released. Before she could speak, the lights flickered, then went out. The house fell into silence. Aurora felt her chest tighten. Damien reached for the flashlight on his desk. "Stay close," he said. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway, faint but deliberate. The two of them moved carefully through the dark until a shadow stepped into view. A man in a hood holding a small drive in his hand. "Ethan sends his love," the man said, before tossing the drive onto the floor and disappearing into the storm outside. Damien grabbed the drive, his jaw tense. Aurora followed him back into the study. He plugged it into his laptop. A single video appeared on the screen. Ethan's face appeared again, recorded long before his arrest. He smiled coldly. "If you're seeing this, West, it means I've lost, but you'll never be clean as long as this world remembers me. Everything you tried to hide will rise again unless you choose to bury it yourself." Damien slammed the laptop shut, his voice hard enough. "I'm done letting him control me." Aurora placed her hand over his. He looked up and saw the calm determination in her eyes. "Maybe that's what he wanted all along," she said, "to make you afraid. But he's gone. Damien, you're not." Her words settled something inside him. The fire that had once driven him now felt different. Not anger, not revenge, but resolve. He took a breath and said, "Tomorrow morning we end this publicly. No more secrets." The next day, Damien and Aurora walked into the headquarters of Westbridge Enterprises, the same place that had once cast them out. The board waited, faces tight with expectation. He walked to the center of the room and placed the flash drive on the table. "I came here not to fight for control, but to tell the truth." He said, "This company was built on mistakes and lies, but not all of them were mine. Some belong to the man who tried to destroy me, and some belong to me for letting fear decide who I became." He looked at Aurora, his voice steady. "I can't erase the past, but I can build a better future, one based on honesty." The boardroom was silent until one of the directors finally spoke. "Westbridge belongs to those who lead with integrity, not fear. If you mean what you say, the company still needs you." Damien paused, then shook his head. "I don't want it anymore. I've already found what matters." Later that day, Damien and Aurora walked through the city hand in hand, the clouds clearing above them. They stopped near the old bookstore in the coastal town where she had once hidden. Damien smiled softly. "I bought this place," he said. "It's going to be a foundation for education, scholarships for people who want a second chance." She looked at him, tears glinting in her eyes. "You really are building something that matters." He nodded and said, "It started with you. Months passed, seasons changed, and life slowly grew quiet again. The world moved on. The story of the scandal faded, replaced by stories of kindness and rebuilding. One afternoon, Aurora stood on the porch of their small seaside home, reading letters from the students. Their foundation had helped. Laughter echoed from inside where Damien was helping unpack books for the library. As the sun set, he stepped outside, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned into him, smiling against his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how it all began?" she asked. "The break room, the joke." He laughed softly. "Every day. And I'd still let it happen again," he whispered, "because that mistake was the only right thing I ever did." The sky burned orange and gold as waves rolled against the shore. Aurora turned to face him, her voice barely a whisper. "I love you, Damien." He smiled, that quiet, rare smile that had once seemed impossible. "I love you too, Aurora, always." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, the past finally settled behind them. The world that had once tried to break them now watched them rebuild from ruin. Their love no longer forbidden, no longer secret, but something unshakable, born from pain, tested by fire, and stronger than destiny itself. The careless joke that had started it all had become the story of how two broken hearts found the courage to begin again.